Picture Alaska, vast, beautiful, and American, a land of towering mountains, endless forests, and wild rivers that stretch as far as the eye can see. It's a place that feels both remote and majestic, a true frontier at the edge of the continent. But here's the thing, Alaska isn't actually connected to the rest of the United States by land. It's separated by thousands of miles of Canadian wilderness, making it a unique outpost that's both part of America and yet, in some ways, apart from it. To get there by road, you have to cross Canada, traveling through another country just to reach your own state. It's a bit like having to walk through your neighbor's garden every time you want to get home, except your garden path is a 390-mile stretch of highway winding through forests, mountains, and snow. This means Alaska depends on Canadian highways, especially the legendary Alaska Highway, for nearly everything it needs to survive and thrive. Food, fuel, building supplies, even medical equipment. All of it travels this international route, braving harsh weather and long distances to reach Alaskan communities. For decades, this cross-border lifeline has worked smoothly, a testament to the close and friendly relationship between the U.S. and Canada, built on trust and cooperation. Most of Alaska's fresh produce, vital goods, and time-sensitive cargo all arrive via these Canadian routes, keeping store shelves stocked and families supplied. It's not just a convenience, it's a necessity, woven into Alaskan life for generations, shaping the way people live, work, and connect with the outside world. But what happens when that neighborly path is threatened? When someone decides to slap on a hefty inconvenience fee or block the way entirely? Suddenly, the lifeline that seems so reliable is at risk. That's exactly the crisis that erupted in early 2025, sending shockwaves through both countries and leaving Alaskans wondering how they'd get by. And it all started with a tariff threat that would turn this peaceful arrangement into a frosty standoff, testing the strength of cross-border ties like never before. Enter former President Donald Trump, never one for subtlety, who in March 2025 threatened a sweeping 25% tariff on nearly all Canadian and Mexican imports. The stated goal? Protect American jobs and industries, but the move felt more like a sledgehammer than a scalpel. For Canada, whose economy is deeply tied to the U.S., this was a major shock, like your best customer suddenly demanding a huge fee just to keep buying from you. The Canadian government wasn't about to roll over, and tensions quickly escalated. Even more alarming, Trump's rhetoric hinted at military action and even annexation, leaving Canadian officials stunned. The message from Canada: thanks, but we're happy with our own healthcare and spelling of color. Suddenly, the world's friendliest border was anything but. Canada, and especially British Columbia, wasn't going to just take this lying down. The province had a reputation for standing its ground, and this time was no different. The threat from the US was met with a steely resolve, and BC leaders quickly began strategizing their response. BC Premier David Eby responded with a bold move. If the US imposed tariffs, BC would hit back by charging tolls on American trucks using its highways to reach Alaska. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was a direct challenge to the US, targeting a vital supply route that thousands of Americans depended on. The Economic Stabilization Tariff Response Act, introduced in March 2025, gave BC the power to impose these tolls if needed. The legislation was crafted swiftly, reflecting the urgency of the situation and the seriousness with which BC viewed the threat. This wasn't an idle threat, it was a clear warning: mess with our economy and we'll squeeze your supply lines. The message was broadcast loud and clear, not just to Washington, but to the world. The tolls wouldn't appear overnight, but the legislation was a loaded weapon, ready if the US didn't back down. It was a calculated move, designed to give BC leverage in negotiations and to show they were prepared to act if pushed. The bill was temporary, set to expire in 2027, but the message was unmistakable. BC would defend its interests no matter how long the standoff lasted. The government made it clear that this was about protecting jobs, communities, and the province's economic future. Deputy Premier Nikki Sharma summed it up: "We don't want to do this, but we need the option if the US won't budge." Her words echoed the sentiment of many British Columbians, reluctant but resolute. Suddenly, the quiet highways of northern BC became the front lines of a major trade dispute. What was once a peaceful route through forests and mountains was now a potential choke point in North American commerce. The usually smooth flow of goods to Alaska was now at risk of grinding to a halt. Truckers, businesses, and entire communities began to brace for the impact of a possible blockade. For the first time in decades, the road to Alaska was in jeopardy. The uncertainty sent shockwaves through both sides of the border, raising questions about what would happen next. The U.S. had to decide, escalate or negotiate. The pressure was mounting, and the world was watching to see which path Washington would choose. The stakes for both sides had never been higher. Billions of dollars in trade, the livelihoods of thousands, and the stability of a crucial international relationship all hung in the balance. And Alaskans were caught in the middle, anxiously watching events unfold, uncertain about their future and the fate of the only road that connected them to the rest of the continent. While politicians sparred, Alaskans faced a real crisis. The threat of BC tolls sent shockwaves through the state, where most fresh produce and high-value goods arrived by truck through Canada. Alaska State Senator Robert Myers, himself a trucker, warned that tolls could make groceries unaffordable and disrupt vital industries like oil. The Alaska Trucking Association predicted higher prices and supply chain chaos. Businesses worried about delays, costs, and their ability to serve communities. Governor Mike Dunleavy urged restraint, hoping for a diplomatic solution and warning against rash moves by either side. For ordinary Alaskans, this wasn't about politics. It was about putting food on the table and keeping the lights on. The state found itself a pawn in a much bigger game. The message from Alaska: let's keep the lifeline open. As tensions rose, the rhetoric got sharper. President Trump accused Canada of unfair trade, vowing to fix what he called a raw deal. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau fired back, promising retaliatory tariffs if the U.S. moved ahead. This was no longer just a BC issue. The federal government was now fully engaged. BC officials insisted their toll plan was defensive, not aggressive, and aimed to protect Canadian interests. Yukon Premier Ranj Pillai joined in, declaring, "Canada will never be the 51st American state." The dispute was now about more than trade. It was about sovereignty and national pride. The world's longest undefended border was suddenly bristling with tension. And summer 2025 was shaping up to be anything but calm. BC's toll plan was just the start. What began as a targeted response quickly grew into a much broader movement, as provinces across Canada looked for new ways to push back against American trade policies. Premier Eby ordered a halt to buying American products where possible, and BC liquor stores stopped selling alcohol from Republican-led U.S. states, including Alaska. The move sent a clear message. BC was willing to take real economic steps, even if it meant emptying shelves and changing long-standing business relationships. Ontario joined in, slapping a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., threatening higher utility bills for American consumers. The surcharge was designed to hit back where it hurt, targeting a vital resource and making it clear that Canada could play hardball too. Yukon's government-run liquor stores also stopped buying American, and U.S. businesses were barred from Yukon contracts. The territory, though small, made its stance known, showing solidarity with the rest of Canada and refusing to be left out of the growing movement. Premier Pillai stressed these moves weren't aimed at ordinary Alaskans, but were necessary to defend Canadian interests. He emphasized that the actions were about standing up for fairness, not punishing neighbors, and that Canada's hand had been forced. Some Yukoners even suggested tolls on their stretch of the Alaska Highway, banning Alaskan athletes from the Arctic Winter Games, or blocking Donald Trump Jr. from hunting trips. These ideas, while sometimes tongue-in-cheek, reflected a real sense of frustration and a desire to take action, no matter how symbolic. The trade dispute was sparking creative and sometimes cheeky forms of pushback. Canadians were brainstorming new ways to make their voices heard, from protest art to community meetings, determined to show that they wouldn't back down easily. Across Canada, the mood was shifting from polite to resolute. What started as frustration was turning into a powerful sense of unity, as people from coast to coast rallied together in defense of their country's interests. The message: Canada wouldn't be bullied. The country was drawing a line in the sand, determined to protect its economy and its dignity. no matter the cost. The economic battle lines were multiplying, and with every new measure, the stakes were rising. The world was watching as Canada stood its ground, ready for whatever came next. U.S. politicians weren't sitting idle either. Alaskan Senator Dan Sullivan threatened to target BC's cruise ship industry by waiving the Passenger Vessel Services Act. This law requires foreign flag cruise ships to stop in a foreign port, usually in BC, on their way to Alaska. If waived, ships could bypass BC entirely, costing the province millions in lost tourism. With nearly 2 million cruise passengers expected in Alaska for summer 2025, the stakes were huge. BC's tourism sector, employing thousands, suddenly faced a major threat. The dispute over tolls was now threatening a multi-billion-dollar industry. The economic fallout could ripple far beyond the highways. The message from Alaska: don't mess with our tourists. The trade war was now a tourism war too. Meanwhile, another dispute was brewing over the Shakwa Corridor, a vital road linking Alaska through BC and Yukon. The U.S. had long funded its maintenance, recognizing its importance for Alaskans. In 2024, Yukon secured $31 million in U.S. funding for repairs, a symbol of cross-border cooperation. But in early 2025, President Trump froze the funds with an executive order halting planned roadwork. Yukon confirmed the freeze was hurting the territory and its infrastructure plans. Alaska lawmakers protested, likening it to a neighbor refusing to pay their share for a shared driveway. The funding pause became another flashpoint in already tense relations. The border was growing colder, literally and figuratively. By June 2025, the Canada-US relationship was at a crossroads. What began as a tariff threat had spiraled into a multi-front dispute, affecting groceries, tourism, and even road repairs. Alaska's legislature tried to cool things down, affirming Canadian ties but condemning retaliatory tolls. The lesson? These two countries are deeply intertwined, economically, culturally, and personally. When relations sour, everyone feels it. The hope is for cooler heads, compromise, and a return to cooperation. Because in the north, the only thing that should be frosty is the weather.